You're listening to a CNA podcast.
Japan is preparing to fire up the world's largest nuclear plant, nearly 15 years after the disaster at the Fukushima Daiichi facility. Restarting a reactor at the Kashiwazaki-Kariwa plant this month would bring atomic energy back to Tokyo and its surroundings. And it would mean about a third of the nearly 50 nuclear reactors in Japan are churning out power. Japanese authorities say Asia's number 2 economy needs the energy, particularly in the capital. Critics say the nuclear risks never disappeared. So, is this a hard economic necessity or a dangerous roll of the dice? I'm Genevieve Woo, and joining me is CNA's Senior Correspondent Michiyo Ishida in Tokyo. Michiyo, let's start with some context of Japan's energy needs. The authorities say that Japan needs this. What's the main energy source that Japan relies on?
Let me give you a big picture. According to Agency for Natural Resources and Energy, as of fiscal year 2023, the breakdown is this: 35.6% oil, 24.5% coal, 20.7% LNG, meaning 80.8% reliance on fossil fuels, 11.4% renewables, and 4.1% on nuclear power. Now, regarding oil, 95% came from the Middle East. The top two countries were Saudi Arabia and UAE. In terms of coal, 64% have been imported from Australia, 15.5% from Indonesia, followed by Canada and the US. In terms of LNG, 41.6% from Australia, 15.6% from Malaysia, followed by Russia and the US. Too many numbers, but this is how it is.
Wow, 80% of that is fossil, and like you said, it's pretty much all imported. Now, why does Japan rely so heavily on imported energy?
Japan is scarce of natural resources. Its self-sufficiency rate is 12.6%. Now, among OECD nations, Japan is ranked 37th. By the way, ranked number 1 is Norway, followed by Australia. Now, self-sufficiency rate back in financial year 2010 reached up to 20%, but it dropped in 2011 after the Fukushima nuclear meltdown. And before that incident, 54 nuclear reactors powered 30% of Japan's energy, and they were gradually shut down after the accident. And for a month after the Fukushima accident, I recall how Tokyo had a rolling blackout. Fukushima's nuclear plants were basically supplying power to the Tokyo area. And to make up for the reduction of energy, old thermal power plants were restarted. So again, more reliance on fossil fuel.
Old thermal plants were restarted, and that would not be the most efficient, is it? They just had to bring it back again because nuclear was shut down.
That's right.
Now, because of this reliance on imported energy, and I suppose increasingly the geopolitical tensions, the geopolitical uncertainties, makes this reliance rather precarious. This is where I suppose nuclear power plays into self-reliance, isn't it?
The government wanted to reduce reliance on fossil fuel, as you have mentioned, which is mostly imported. But international conflicts can affect the supply chain and raise costs. And based on Japan's new energy plan introduced in 2025, the ability to supply sustainable energy for individuals and industries are relevant. So as not to rely heavily on fossil fuel, Japan has started to aim to shift to a balanced supply of various energy sources and raise its energy self-sufficiency to up to 40% by financial year 2040. 40%. I don't know if it's going to be achievable, but that's the target. And nuclear power could be then raised to 20% of energy supply for that same year, according to the government. And with reliance on fossil fuel reduced, Japan aims to cut CO2 emission, and it's by 46% from the 2013 fiscal year level by 2030. and if possible, aim higher for a 50% reduction. And by 2050, it aims for zero emission.
That is a tall order. It's very ambitious.
Yeah.
And right now, clean energy mix is only 11%. If nuclear comes back into the mix, nuclear is considered clean energy, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, definitely it is.
It goes back to the goal of a balanced supply and also the goal of clean energy.
Yeah, that's the way the Japanese government intends to go. And that was the aim before the nuclear disaster. And it's finally going back to that with more nuclear power plants starting up. Now, the World Nuclear Association also recognizes Japan's need to include nuclear back in the country's energy mix. Have a listen to what the Director General, Sama Bilbao Leon, has to say about the move to reopen Japan's nuclear plants.
What we are seeing in Japan right now is that they are accelerating as much as they can to restart all the units that exist. And frankly, they are also contemplating whether they are going to need additional units built in Japan to meet this 22% of their electricity demand by 2050.
Nuclear energy has always been a controversial issue. Now, in particular to this case, the company that was in charge of the Fukushima plant was TEPCO. And of course, the following disaster and all that, TEPCO suffered a huge blow to its reputation. And now, 15 years on, TEPCO is now the same company that will operate the reopening of the Kashiwazaki plant. Is this going to be a problem? Is this why it's ruffling feathers?
TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, has not run a nuclear reactor since the Fukushima nuclear accident back in 2011. So there are definitely worries here about the firm restarting the reactor at Kashiwazaki-Kariwa. Now, Nomura Research Institute conducted a survey of Niigata residents, where the plant is located, in September last year. And 60% of respondents said they did not think Kashiwazaki-Kariwa has met the criteria, the safety criteria. And actually, the plant has had incidents in the past before the Fukushima incident. For instance, in 2007, the plant experienced a strong tremor from a magnitude 6.8 earthquake. There was a fire in the facility, and due to communication issues, extinguishing the fire took around 2 hours. And there was radiation leakage, although it was minor. And TEPCO is aware of concerns among the public. I sat down with TEPCO's risk communicator, Mr. Masakatsu Takada, who explained the company's stance on safety.
We try to take away worries and build understanding of nuclear power. The fact that we will be able to restart Kashiwazaki-Kariwa's Reactor 6 indicates we have taken one step forward.
TEPCO is very aware that they have to address the communication issue. So back then in the earlier issues, like you said, and also Fukushima, that was also a huge communication gap. What else did you discuss with him about regaining public trust?
Safety measures before 2011 were measures against natural disaster, fire, power source safety, and accountability of facilities, and of course, seismic strength and tsunami prevention. But these requirements became more stringent, and requirements were expanded after the Fukushima accident. New regulations were set up that's dealing with overflowing water, damage prevention measures of reactor core, containment vessel, spread of radioactive material, anti-terrorism such as attack by aircrafts. And 14 reactors were up and running by January 2025, which have passed the requirement. And of course, TEPCO has also been making the efforts to meet the requirement, and it has. And here's Mr. Takada again.
We have looked into a wider range of risks from the time before March 11, 2011, based on assumptions of a bigger earthquake. We built a 15-meter tsunami wall with an assumption of a 7 to 8 meter high tsunami.
Now, reopening the plant also needed, of course, the government's approval, the authorities. Now, the governor's vote of confidence was essentially a referendum on the restart, isn't it? To what extent is this a genuine reflection of the public will? And you spoke to residents in the area too, didn't you?
That's correct. TEPCO had to gain the authorization from the nuclear watchdog, the government, and also the local government, which is Niigata prefecture. And on the 21st of November last year, Niigata Governor Hideo Hanazumi declared his approval of the restart of Unit 6 of the Kashiwazaki-Kariwa plant. And he requested his assembly to assist his decision, and the assembly approved. Now, the point here is the Liberal Democratic Party controls the assembly, and LDP is the ruling party and supports the restart of nuclear reactors. But local survey shows those for and against are very close. And I was told that by local media too. I actually spoke to residents, and there were many with mixed reactions. First, let's hear from Mr. Ikuo Kusuma, who was raised near Kashiwazaki-Kariwa plant. And then we will also hear from Ms. Atsuko Murakami, who does publicity work in Niigata Prefecture.
福島の第二を見たときに
When I saw what happened at the Fukushima plant, from my point of view, this is obviously out.
でしかもここに危険負担
We're not consuming power here in Niigata. We have to carry the burden of a possible risk. But if you ask me whether the restart of the plant is needed or not, it's needed.
I do support its restart because realistically, it can impact the local economy and industry. Its restart must be conducted from the point of view of local residents. But there is no clear information about it. What will be its impact? Is it safe? Is it a threat?
One element that may contribute, right, to increasing public trust is how TEPCO is progressing on the release of treated waters, isn't it? From Fukushima. And Michiyo, you remember how both of us were covering that incident back in 2023 when the first round of water was discharged. You remember there were actually protests that we both witnessed over there?
Yeah, there were protests, correct. Yeah, everybody was worried at that time.
Yeah, not just locals, but the neighbors were protesting too. Remember China?
Yes, especially South Korea and China. Yes, because we share water, but it's on the other side of, the Japanese archipelago.
Yes, but it was quite serious because it led to a ban of Japanese seafood from China. So there were a lot of economic implications as well.
That's correct, yeah.
And so the Fukushima, but also locally, there was also a gag order. Remember, we spoke to the fishermen and they were told not to speak on the issue to media.
It was really difficult to, speak to fishermen at that time.
So this time round, do we get that same pushback, you think?
It's been a year and a half since treated water, so-called treated water, was released into the sea. So people are more used to the situation now. And TEPCO has been doing a lot of publicity to explain to local residents, invite media to cover, both domestic and international media, show the plant where the water that's accumulated in the plant is treated and discharged into the sea. They have all the measurements on their website. They've been inviting the IAEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency, to regularly inspect and check the water. And among that team, they include Russian, Chinese, South Korean experts. And the IAEA has an office at the Fukushima plant. So basically, TEPCO is making a lot of efforts to make sure that people know what's happening.
That's right.
And if radiation level does go up, then they will alert people.
Yeah, exactly. So TEPCO looks like they have stepped up the communication strategy to reassure. And this is very much in line with the reopening of this nuclear plant, isn't it? Because the next phase of release of the treated waters is in April 2026. Is that on track?
It is taking place as scheduled. The issue right now is more about removing the melted debris from the reactors because that is a very difficult task. Radiation level inside is very high. And the moment you have your equipment in there, they're contaminated greatly. TEPCO is really having a tough time doing that process, but removing the treated water is going smoothly. And that is really necessary for the plant because water is accumulating in the plant, contaminated water, also rainwater. And unless they provide space in the Fukushima plant, they won't be able to continue on with the decommission process because they have to place all the debris and things that have been removed from plant into the space for storage.
So these challenges that TEPCO is facing with the treated waters of Fukushima, but they're also being very transparent about the process, about the challenges, and that is going to link back very closely to the public perception of how they're going to manage the reopening of Kashiwazaki. Would you say that?
Yeah, I think that is true. So actually more people are, generally speaking, nationwide, support of the restart of nuclear plants. Let me give you some examples. Major daily Mainichi Shimbun survey in December suggested that those who support reached 48%, while those who are against 21%. One of the reasons is due to higher electricity fee in Japan. The Japanese government wants to build more data center to promote generative AI, which is said to consume a lot of energy. So that is one of the main reasons the Japanese government is giving for the need to restart nuclear power plant. Japan needs more stable supply of electricity also from experiencing hot summer. Last year was the worst with temperature in Tokyo constantly hitting 35 degrees from June to October. And usually the hot summer season or the months in Japan, Tokyo especially, were August and September. So the hot summer months have been expanding and many have been suffering from heat stroke with many people trying to conserve energy. So on the back of these factors, residents seem to be more tolerant towards nuclear power.
Now, you're absolutely right. The rising costs of living in Japan, especially since COVID, has been really frustrating. And of course, like you said, energy cost is a big bread and butter issue. So would you say being more pragmatic for the Japanese makes them more willing to accept nuclear risks?
Yeah. So that's why I mentioned the survey that's been publicized just recently. Having said that, there is this big issue. That is, where do the spent fuel go? Most are stored on site of the plant, and the government is searching for a final storage space. So far, 3 towns and villages have accepted the first stage of 3-stage screening to whether to check they can actually accept the debris. And the aim is to store 300 meters underground. And Japan is earthquake prone, right? So they have to find an appropriate place where there is no earthquake fault running. This is going to be a very challenging task. And there is no assurance that if they pass the screening, residents will approve. This is one big challenge. And of course, the government will provide subsidies to towns or village which decides to accept and which pass the screening. So there is more to be handled, many years ahead.
The subject of nuclear, there are many trade-offs. Yes, there are many positives, but the trade-offs are also very heavy. The restart of Kashiwazaki-Kariwa plant isn't just about one reactor or one company. It's about how Japan balances memory and necessity, fear and pragmatism. As the country prioritizes energy security, the question remains, how much risk is acceptable and who bears the consequences if the calculation turns out to be wrong? This episode of the CNA Correspondent Podcast was brought to you by Clara Ong, Tiffany Ang, Ned Vetivero, Craig Dale and me, Genevieve Woo. Bye for now.